Yeah, so this is a scene that I particularly love the shapes here. Obviously there's the nice juxtaposition between the grassy area of the park and then the concrete structures that make up each of these little islands. Actually, right? They're little islands that make up an entire island. So it's a fun park to walk through, and you just get a nice um, slice of every which way you look. You get a slice of Manhattan or across the river through a different vantage point. Uh, Depending on certain spots, you could be looking through like tall blades of wheat, like almost like a wheat field. Hi, Karen.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So, thanks for joining again. Mac is here, and we're just gonna go into this scene, which is you probably recognize it. I shot it from a little corner in Little Island, probably I think in the fall. Uh, yeah, I just thought it would be nice opportunity to deal with some large shapes and also some clouds, some interesting cloud formations. Not too much, but just enough that we can kind of experiment, and you can see my general approach to how I would do clouds like this. Every time we do clouds, it's pretty much like almost like an experiment. There's so many different ways you can go about it, but we'll see if we can do it together. So I'm going to just start sketching. I'm just trying to see general layout, like this line here. And it goes about 2/3 of the way up to this corner. Probably should be more like this way, but yeah, this is a 9 by 12 piece of paper, so a little bit larger than what I've been doing in the last few sessions. But I figure because of the way we have several large blocks of information here, it's not going to necessarily be much harder to fill up the page. That would be kind of a general consideration when I'm picking the picture, and so I don't want it to be overwhelming for any of us, and I want to be able to finish something within an hour. So this seems to be, I think, pretty good. This may be manageable. Yeah, and I think some of the, we have large structures, large blocks of information here, so some things are kind of cut out for us. Maybe some subtleties that will be interesting to deal with are the curvature of these the little islands. Those structures sort of have they have a sheen, and they also have the way the light is reflecting off the bottom of each of them implies the curvature, the shapes of these. And then I'm just gonna try to deal with the fencing here. I'm just going to draw the general angles of the tops of the fence, the slats. And remembering that as things go up in the perspective, as they go up from us, it gets taller, and then going down here, it gets shorter and shorter. So tall to short. I don't know if it may be difficult for you to see this still, but as the pencil part usually is. But I think this is one of those images where I can get started painting relatively quickly. Yeah. This is actually my very first time trying to depict these structures from that park. I've been wanting to paint them in some way for a long time. So I'm just estimating here the angles. There's an interesting curve here with the fencing. So I'm just getting the tops of these, the poles, in the slats in the fence. I'll have time later to go in and kind of refine them by making them more individual. What else here? So I'm just taking note that there's some foliage. We have foliage in the tree above here. I'm going to just kind of do a rough blob here just to remind myself later that there's some branches, there's foliage, there's some bushes. Yeah, and then over here we're going to have some blades of grass. I'm keeping in mind the dark areas here, kind of created by the structures that are blocked. That will be helpful for us as we navigate the order of what I'm going to put down. There's some blades of grass here. I'm not going to deal with each one of them separately, obviously, but yeah, so there are some, I think it's okay to go ahead and put some of these circles that represent the top of the poles here. Not going to be terribly exact about it, but just noting that, as these circles go away from you, they flatten and become more like ovals until when they're really far, they're just not even really ovals, they're just almost like slits.
Do you know what material those little islands are made of?
I think they're concrete. I think they're concrete.
They have a metallic paint on them or something? Because they have a metallic.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Yeah, metallic sheen on the.
Yeah, I think it's actually just concrete. I don't think they're painted or anything. They could be. I don't know. Okay, and then up here we have the clouds. One way I could go about it is to, kind of sketch out the rough areas where there are the formations. But I'm going to just be a little bit looser about it, and I'm going to try to. I'm not going to use white of the paper to represent the clouds. Rather, I'm going to do a wash over the whole area, and then I'm going to just try to use use something absorbent like a paper towel and blot out, kind of lift up the paint and see how that works. So I'm not going to do a very, You know, it's interesting. I might do several layers here, and that way I can keep making the blue richer and richer with each layer, but I can still lift up the areas where I want the clouds to be. So I think I can get started painting here. And, you know, because I typically, when I'm doing a sky section, I'm going to use a flat brush because I can cover the area so much faster and you can get it more even. Okay, so let me put my water here. And sorry, let me just get a paper towel really quick. And actually, yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and wet the paper. I'm gonna get it pretty wet. I'm generally going to cover the paper that's all the way up to the edge of the concrete here. We can always deal with the areas beneath the structures, like the water, in a separate paths. So let's look at, I'm going to look at my swatches, my paints that are on the piece of paper, and kind of just get a feel for what might work here. You know, I tend to go with a phthalo blue, which is the one that's up here. I tend to go with that as my go-to sky in the past couple years. I really enjoy that one. There's also ultramarine blue, which is going to be slightly warmer than that one. And there's a French ultramarine. Maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to try it on the scrap piece of paper. See how we feel about that. Okay, that's the ultramarine. Now I'm going to go with the French ultramarine, which is a little, I believe it's a little cooler. And then let's try the phthalo blue. Yeah, that probably, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to try the ultramarine, the ultramarine. And then there's also this indanthrone blue that I have, which I might use in another pass. To go over like some of the darker areas, because you see how the top of the sky might actually, you know, it gets darker as we get higher up. And let me just move this a little bit. I realize it might not be visible from on your screen. So as we go higher up into the sky, the colors get richer. So my paper is pretty wet. I'm just going to go over it again. Well, I have some blue tin in there already, but it's okay. I'm going to go with the ultramarine. I'm going to do a really pretty rich layer here. I'm just going back and forth fast because I want to try to cover that area because it's drying. Okay, so I've made sure the paper is covered, and then I'm going to go in and actually, you can do this with paper or with the brush. you know, kind of just follow the pattern of the clouds and what you're noticing. And you want to like try to get a cleaner surface of the paper as you go along, so you're not just putting pigment back onto it. So it's kind of a neat effect. Yeah. And I'll probably want to lighten up the areas down here as we get closer, as we get further down in the sky. It should be a little brighter, but we'll also achieve that effect by doing another pass on top of this. I'm going to try the Indanthrone blue and basically start from the top and go down and let it naturally fade into a brighter value. So, you know, I'm almost like destroying what I just did, but I think it's also an interesting effect because it'll, when I lift up, I'll also be able to kind of lift up on areas that I had lifted up previously. So this is like a very easy way of, you know, simulating some diffuse clouds that are in the sky. It's kind of a neat technique. All right. And you notice I don't care too much about where the sky meets the objects, because the edges of these are really going to be they're really going to be covered up anyway by the darker masses that are on the structures, right? The foliage, the trees, etc. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and I'll start working on the other areas. I'm noticing that, you know, there's some orange tints here, orange like on the surface of the concrete, orange in the clouds even. So I don't necessarily have to wait for this to dry to start putting some in, but actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and let's just see what happens if we put some orange up there. I'm going to pick this orange that I have here. I think it might be a nice effect. Yeah, actually, you know, the orange helps give it some depth. And it gives us a feeling of direction of the light. All right, so I'm just going to do that a little bit. I don't want to overdo that because I don't want to ruin what I've put down. I do notice here though, like on the edge, the surface here of the island, there's a nice orange reflective area, and I'm gonna actually try to capture that. I'm laying down some water, clean water, and I'm gonna just drop in some orange there. And this will also help unify, like aesthetically, it'll bring the whole painting together because there's orange here and then orange up in the clouds. It will feel harmonious and natural. I'm trying to make that as soft as I can. I don't want it to really stand out with like any hard edges. So you notice I put water down and then I put the paint with, as long as the pigment stays within, inside the, well within the borders of that, of the water that I put down, it will result in a nice diffused blended edge all around. So you see as that's drying, it's actually just a really nice, diffused shape. Actually, maybe what I'll do is, because, in values wise, I do want to make sure I capture the lightest areas, that I don't cover them up. I think the area of the water that's just below the horizon, we can't see the horizon, but the area below the horizon is pretty bright and it's, got this greenish aqua tint to it. I'm going to try to do that here. I'm using my Paraline green, and yeah, if I do a lighter version of that, I think that will help capture it. Now, even though we're talking about light areas that are in between, that are visible in between these structures, I'm gonna go ahead and just, I actually think it's a similar color all the way out, all the way throughout, right? So like the area that's underneath, it's almost the same tint and value as what we see on the top here. So that actually can be to our advantage. I actually see some orange still there. So I'm gonna put a little bit of orange there. All right, so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and wet all of the concrete area. And the water around that's underneath. So these are like kind of calculations you have to make kind of on the fly. And it's okay, it's not gonna, in some ways it's like doing a study where you're just kind of experimenting with the approach, and sometimes it will work out, sometimes it won't work out all the way, but you'll at least come away with some knowledge about how you can approach it if you do a second time. All right, I'm making sure that my green is light enough, and I'm adding more water to it, but I want to be careful about not adding too much water back into the water that I put on there. So Notice I'm just going over all of the areas that I put, including the areas underneath. I think this greenish tint is going to be the overarching, it's going to set the overarching tone. All right. So you see how up here, you know, it's really just playing around with the clouds. The orange that I put down has dried in a somewhat hard edged fashion, and you know, it's just kind of, I guess you could call it a happy accident, but it's also, it also depends on how you actually, what kind of brush you use, but also if when you put it down. So if I had done it a little earlier, I could have made it blend a little bit better. I can still make it blend by going over the edges with the brush. I'll show you what that might look like right now. Yeah, clouds are always a tricky subject. So I've managed to just soften the edges a little bit there. So it is a humid day here, so things are taking a little bit longer to dry, I think. So I'm gonna have this extend. I'm gonna extend the green down a little bit more, just by adding some water to the edge of where the paint stopped up here. I'm not gonna overlap it too much, because I want to make sure I get the color there in between, the color of the water in between those poles. So it's one thing I'm trying to like fix. Same down here. You know, I'm basically, I should have just covered all of this area. Even though a lot of it will be covered with the darker colors of the, I guess they're wooden, the wooden poles. All right. Just as a test, I'm going to see if I can still lift up some of this from the clouds. And I probably can't lift up too much more without starting to ruin the paper. And some colors, it's easier to lift up. Yeah, I think that's the best I'm going to do there. And remember, up here we have the fencing that's at top. We can't see my pencil lines there anymore, but it's okay. I think we can kind of estimate the angle of the top of the fence. Yeah. I'm going to put in some colors down here to help lay down a layer to represent the, I guess it's wheat and other growth there. So I'm going to wet all of that. I think what I'll do is use a bit of burnt sienna, just a bit. I don't want to be too rich, but I think the overall tone is what I need. And then going in there with some greens. As an underlayer of green. Same with on this side. I'm gonna do here an underlayer of green, which will indicate some of the blades of grass later. So some things I'm thinking about is we have to take care to indicate the curvature of these islands, and we'll do that by making sure we have some soft-edged, darker areas. And then we're going to pay attention to the poles that are here. I actually didn't sketch those support beams down here, but I'll do that with the paint. Any questions? You guys are hearing me okay? Hope so.
Yes, I was having a hard time unmuting. I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Me too.
Great. All right, so I'm trying to figure out what to work on next. I typically will bounce around from section to section, sometimes based on how wet an area is, sometimes based on like what paint do I have in the palette, in the mixing dish that I can use. So we've got like basic underlayers put down. I think I'm going to work on the undersides of these structures, and I think that's going to be basically like a coolish, like a gray color. I may just go with the Payne's gray as a kind of default here. This Payne's gray is bluish, on the bluish end. And what I'll do here is put some water down, make sure we get some coverage here, and I'm going to overlap with some of that orange that I put down. And I'm leaving some space down here there are some lighter structures on the bottom. Go back into the gray, and I'm just gonna fill in these areas here. And you can see how the edges are pretty diffuse. I may go back in also and just shape them a little bit more. May just drop in some more paint to make it even darker. While I'm at it, I might as well just put in this line here. It's not perfect, but alright, so I'm going to do a similar thing here. This is the small area here that should be black or very dark. So you see how I put down the water first to help me kind of scope out the border, and it just helps the paint flow into the area that I want it to. And then let me do the same thing over here. I always use my pinky to kind of support my hand so that I'm not putting the side of my palm onto the paper. So I'm kind of just lightly using my pinky as a support. Yeah, so it's starting to take shape. I'm actually going to I'm going to coax this gray down further down the paper. I'm going to add a little bit more darks to these existing areas. So when we're painting structures, right, it just naturally makes you try to be a little bit more exact and precise. So I do like painting structures, but sometimes when I've done it too much, I will like alternate and work on a painting that isn't as structured. And then over here, we've got a very dark area. Any questions at all? And for these areas up here where the shrubs and foliage are kind of sticking out above the edge, I'm going to go ahead and just start doing them as really dark. And then I'm going I've been having fun like putting some darks down first and then adding some lights to the edges around them. So it's just loose, pretty loose. Now, I wouldn't want to leave them all just like this dark Payne's gray, because remember, like with organic things, we want to have some life in them. So what I would do now is go back in with some greens. I'm gonna do this Perylene green is great because it actually gets really dark. So I'll probably just like loosely fill in some here. So you get the hint that this is really like bushes and not just like a dark mass. So I'm just dropping the color in. And I'm just going to go down here, and you know, there's more greens that are visible on this side. And I'm actually going to just start putting some of that tree in. I don't want to be too exact because I don't want to draw too much attention to the tree. Just want to get the shape and the, you know, I think when your eye sees that on the edge, you naturally understand it. You see, I accidentally smeared some paint here, but I think that's okay. We can actually work with that because the surface of the edges of these structures aren't totally clean either. All right, I'm gonna try to work pretty quick here. All right, I'm going to turn to, let's see, back to this pointy brush. You know, these poles that are up here, so again, the angle is like that, so it gets higher as we get to the middle up here. And these are pretty dark. You know, they're objects that are against the bright background. So at least from the picture, we're not really going to be able to register what the color is, but I can assume that they're similar to like the brown and the burnt sienna color of the poles that are in the foreground. But for our purposes, we can keep them pretty dark, like, you know, it's almost like looking black. I don't like this brush too much because it has such a pointy end. So I'm just doing that. I'm putting down enough of these and with enough contrast to just get across the idea of these poles. And then I'm going to work this way down. Yeah, you definitely need some control, I guess, here, but and I'm not trying not to worry too much about the proportions here. It's not exact. you know, as you do more things like fences, and there's definitely ways to go about doing this that help, that are more abstract, and you know, as we go down here, the poles get closer together. So I've basically put down the underlayer for all of those, and what I would do now is just darken them a little bit to make them a little bit more solid. And as we get further down, they get thinner, which is not always easy to convey without good control of the brush. Over here, we see that this fence, you know, it's almost like a solid section of fencing that we don't even have to bother with painting the individual poles. I'm going to add a little bit of brown to that just so we get across the feeling of some warmth in that color. And then finish up some fencing here. Add some darks to show the branches. And I'm just, you know, adding a little bit more contrast here because it's an object that's in front of the bright background. Let me try to get some of these poles here so I can really round out the structures so they're recognizable. And keeping in mind, you know, the foreground, the object in the foreground. Every now and then I'll drop some water accidentally, and you just kind of have to sop it up. Let me get the poles that are in the front here, and there's definitely some burnt sienna in there. I'm going to use the other brush so I can act fast without a pointy edge. I'm going to bring another dish here. So an obvious thing is to fill in these. The tops of the poles have the richest burnt sienna color. And as we go further away, they get thinner and thinner. And then they get more and more unintelligible as you go further away. All right, I'm gonna add some Payne's gray to this to have a darker pigment. And it's a little tricky here because we're trying to communicate like the curvature of this fence, but I'm also squinting just to see, okay, what are the shapes that we're talking about here, right? Like, we know these are poles, but I don't have to draw them as poles. Yeah, this is a little tricky, but it's very, very rough. And again, all of this will dry a little bit lighter, so there's always opportunities to come back in and really indicate very definite lines and shapes. You know, obviously like here, I could even indicate some of these blades of grass by using a relatively dry brush. But I'm not gonna spend too much time on that right now. Let me finish the fence, going back this way. And then once we get up to here, it's almost like just one big mass. All right, so almost done here. I'm going to just take an opportunity to fill in some more of this area with more contour pigments to really just like bring out the contour. So you see how I'm just like kind of implying these, some of these surfaces, not even really worrying about getting the actual likeness. Final touches here to really bring out these dark passages. And then final touches here, I want to add some, sorry, my brush is a little dirty there. I'm going to add some darker, some areas here to show the waves. And I'm going to use the Perylene green. I'm wetting the paper first so that it'll just spread out. Yeah, so you know this is definitely a good challenge where you know it's a mix of. I always love capturing man-made objects and organic life. So I love how in this piece we have the opportunity to capture some trees, some foliage, and also some neat angles, which a lot of times when you have angles and the lines of man-made objects, sometimes it feels just a little bit more comforting, maybe. You feel like it's something. I love it when it starts to appear as like recognizable. It's the thing that you were trying to capture. Any questions? How did this one strike you in terms of, do you think this is hard? Do you think this is something you want to tackle?
I found that this one was a little more challenging just because of the painting the concrete structures, capturing the color and the shape.
Were you working on it too, Karen?
Yeah, I was kind of painting on, but tonight I did a more watching than painting.
Okay.
So, but it's kind of astonishing how much color is in the concrete structures.
Sorry?
How much color and contrast is in the concrete structures that I didn't notice at first.
Right.
Started building the painting.
Right. Yeah, sometimes it's also like hard to get the exact or the value, the blended characteristic of these types of objects when you're working really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always like a fun challenge to do if you have a spare, if you have 30 minutes or something. It's fun to just try to capture. So I'm just kind of like going back in here and I'm seeing what's still requiring some treatment. I think overall it's a good case study in like just quickly making an assessment and deciding, okay, I'm gonna use these colors and I'm going to stick with it. And sometimes that's what you have to do, especially if you're painting plein air, which is just more, you're making decisions on the spot and your light is changing when you're outdoors. So yeah, this is definitely a good lesson in, you kind of have to stay composed too. You kind of have to like commit and say, okay, maybe I don't like exactly how that looks, but let me run with it. And then eventually, things will come together. It may not be exactly what you thought. And then, worst case, you can use it as a study for doing another version of it. Yeah, so we're just past 7 o'clock. Any other thoughts, questions?
I think it was more challenging, just the subject matter.
Yeah.
It was helpful for me because I'm working on something that is structure and nature. So that was helpful.
You're working on something.
Yeah, it's something where there's a creek
Okay.
and trees, but there's also a roadway bridge and a railroad bridge.
Okay.
So Yeah, so it's just, I do find that interesting as well.
Yeah. Oh, great, great.
But I agree. I think those concrete structures they're not easy.
Yeah, I think I'm at a good stopping point there.
It looks great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for watching. And if there's no other comments, I don't want to keep you longer, but I may touch it a little bit further, but and I'll send you the final. But yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for this. Is really cool.
Yeah.
Enjoying it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm back doing it again next Monday. But let me know if you'd want to join that.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see what's going on. With, I think work should be winding down by then, but I just want to be sure before I commit.
Awesome. All right.
Well,
Have a good night, everybody.
All right, thanks, Francis. Bye, Karen.
bye, Mac.
Bye bye.